Welcome everyone to ElleExcel, to the new people who've joined us and the repeat loyalists. I know you're out there. I'm delighted to have you take part in this journey for our 15th installment of the online show. The goal of ElleExcel is to empower women to excel in all aspects of our lives. And to do that, we set out to inspire you, connect with you, and provide you with learning that will enhance your life and how you live it. There are 4 pillars. They start with you. The Me pillar is all about tools for self-help and self-awareness, so you can feel strong and confident in who you are. And the We pillar is all about connecting you to other like-minded women and a support structure that'll help you succeed. Well is just that, feeling well from the inside out, from nutrition to movement to rest and refuel. And lead, well, that's just what we do every day, isn't it? At home and at work. And it's about giving you the targeted skills that are essential for you to thrive. Now, we've been on a tremendous journey with ElleExcel, spanning nearly 2 years now, and thousands of women. Throughout, we've heard from young Olympians on the power of women in sport. We've unpacked what makes each of us remarkable and said it out loud, and that is a lot harder than it sounds. We double-clicked on our communication skills so our messaging landed well and we could communicate with confidence. And throughout, we even met women, exceptional women, challenging convention against some steep odds in the STEM field. And then we nurtured our self-confidence with practical tips and inspiration from Olympic hurdler and founder of the Believe Initiative, Ms. Sarah Wells. We explored what it's like to thrive for today's generation of young women and the parents who support them. And we dug into the complexities along the way of working and parenting and explored compassionate leadership, gaining valuable lessons from some great leading ladies. We dug into what it feels like to lead with heart and vulnerability, and why it's important for us to care for our own hearts along the way. And when we looked at what it meant to mothers to manage in the madness that faces all of us. And then last November, we dove into how diverse cultures shape women how they show up at work and play. And we powered up with purpose with some BMO executives who shared their perspectives on how to do just that. Before laughter entered the conversation, and then we heard stories of happiness and loss and how to manage both while working and challenging convention. Lots of juggling. And then last session, we brought onto the screen the dads into our circle, and they talked about what it's like to raise strong young women who thrive. And today we take it up a notch and we're tackling advocacy from all angles. And throughout ElleExcel in my Women by the Numbers segment, I've explored subjects ranging from the impact of COVID on women at work, to resisting the penchant for perfectionism, to how we can define our power packs of support to ensure that we all excel, all the way into better boundary setting and navigating guilt, something we do every day, and leading with love, exploring motherhood in its various forms. And we double-clicked on things like self-care, which are central to what all of us do. And because wellness is a dominant pillar of ElleExcel, we explored a host of nutritional and wellness tips from multiple experts, and we got up and we moved with yoga with Michelle. And throughout, you've provided valuable feedback and highlighted the importance of empowering women, equality, and balancing your work and home life, all while staying informed and acquiring new skills. Thank you for the tremendous feedback, and please, please keep it coming. So much good ongoing feedback, and you can see some of it here on the screen. It's incredible. You'll recognize some repeat offenders and shout outs. And so much of this good advice and support is coming from this circle day in and day out. As well, a lot of emotion is coming through because we have courageous women on the screen who are sharing their stories every single session. So thank you, and please use the chat thread today to weigh in and provide support to the women who are courageous enough to stand up today and share their stories. Now, I know your feedback dynamically shapes the subjects that we cover on ElleExcel. So we've covered nearly all of them on your top 10 list to date. And many are layered subjects, I will say, and we keep on returning to them for extra dimension. But if you have an idea on what to cover on ElleExcel, drop it in the chat thread now, or if you know of an exceptional speaker or you yourself have relatable knowledge that you feel you'd like to share, drop it in the chat thread or email me directly. I'm happy to look at it. Now, ElleExcel has grown by referrals alone. That's the only source, and you have enlarged the circle to thousands of women who take part in these online shows. If you want to continue to be part of the circle and you've not had a chance to do so, please take 5 minutes and fill out the registration form. The link to it can be found in the chat thread on this meeting to the right, and a completed survey will be your ticket into the next Sept and series of events that are to come. And it also ensures that the content caters to your ongoing needs. What you will get out of it, I promise you, is continued inspiration, connection, and learning. I'm also happy to say that the ElleExcel website has been stood up, and there you can access all of the past program content that you've asked me for. And if you haven't landed there, go to www.elleexcel.ca and take a listen, or forward it to those you think may benefit from being part of our circle. And now for Women by the Numbers. Now, women are made of courage. It's the stuff that courses through our veins, not just some of us. It's not a privilege of the seasoned ones or the weathered ones by time who have a bit of experience, let's say. It's in every single one of us, every one of you, in fact. And all you need to do to believe it is look into her eyes on the screen or into your mirror. But the world would have us believe that courageous women are in some way, let's say, superhuman. Just Google it. Courageous women are furnished with spears and Olympian-level strength, and they're jumping between mountains and walking through war with children in their arms. And this is how the world thinks of courageous women, the archetypes of us. And by that definition, well, we're few and far between, right? Courageous women are edge cases, anomalies, really. We tend also to ascribe courage to the superwomen, those who take a stand and fight for us all. Those who advocate and champion for big stuff like social change. And they indeed deserve our applause. They deserve our sisterhood, in fact. They deserve our thanks. And no question, it takes great, great courage to take that stand and advocate. But what if courage was in the words that were often unspoken? And what if it was so subtle that it hid in plain sight, squirreled away there on the sidelines of a boardroom table, attached to that shy hand that's raised in the meeting? And what if courage was held in the quietest voices of the room, not the loudest? And what if courage of women, on average, was so quiet and so unassuming because that was actually what was expected of us, accepted from us? But what if, for so many of us, courage was quiet and started with a tiny spark? What if it came in like the wind and it burned like a forever flame? And what if you never ever knew it was there until you always knew it was there? And it was in the embers of her, of you, and of us. And what if she, we, me, were just simply waiting for that moment when our fire, the one inside of every one of us, could flame up and heat the whole damn earth? What if? Because life shrinks or expands in proportion to our own courage. Because courage is like this, what I'll say is like a coveted currency. And the caliber of our lives and what we can afford is paid for by the courage we invest day to day. Because life rewards the courageous. We make movies about them. We write books about them. We celebrate it. But courage is often on a different timeline than we're on. Or we believe it's for other women, but maybe not for us. Or we think to ourselves, I was courageous once, but then I lost it. Damn, that was a good time. But as women, our life has the potential to transform in proportion to the courage we invest in it, and specifically in ourselves. And when we do, when we are courageous, that once, that twice, that everyday event, courage burns in us like a persistent flame. Because courage is like a muscle. It's stretched and strengthened and emboldened by use. And not only does courage take strength, it builds strength. Every day, women demonstrate courage. Every day you wake up with a flame, that kind of flame in us that says, I feel like hell, but I'm going to do it anyway. The will that says I can't, but I will. The kind of courage that musters up a meal when you're exhausted and you don't even feel like eating. The courage to say, I've had enough, and no, not today. It's the kind of courage that says, excuse me, I was actually in line. And before you interject, I have something to say, or I need to finish. The courage to pump yourself up before that meeting with everything in you, which was me 2 hours ago. The courage that says, I'll volunteer and I'll take that project. Sure, I'll lead it. The courage to defend your child, your spouse, your friend, someone who can't defend themselves. Or the courage to stand up for and make space for another woman. Maybe even the courage to stand up for yourself and your own needs. Or the courage to leave a relationship that wasn't serving you and where you were not respected. I've been there. I've done that, and I left with half the t-shirt. The courage to leave a marriage or a country where you had no means of supporting yourself. As women, that kind of courage is everyday courage. On any given Monday, Sunday, Wednesday, you name the day, if you're looking for it, you will see it. It's on the screen today. Tell me, what's the most courageous act of everyday courage that you've taken? Please share it with us and put it in the chat thread of today's call so that we can bear witness to your greatness, and also so we can learn how to better recognize everyday courage in women. And here's the thing. When women display courage, that courage reverberates far broader than the fire that it creates in ourselves. It forges a neural pathway between our brain that is rewired and says, when I step up to the plate, I can hit it out of the park. I've done this. I feel this. It feels familiar and possible and right. And bigger than that, courage is contagious. It cascades like ripples in a pond from generation to generation, from mother to child, from sister to sister, from leader to employee, from woman to woman. Courage is contagious. That's the kind of pandemic we want. In this constant refrain of courage, we realize that we can, that I can, that she can, that we can. And perhaps I'll just say that we must. So what happens when courage meets conviction? Do you jump? And in jumping, do you find that the wind actually carries you a bit? That there's momentum and lightness in the air? That there's this sense like you're steering, but that the world is also helping? Jumping and being courageous, no question, comes with great fear, a form of anticipation almost to it, right? All the way through to the experience of it. But here's the thing, guys and gals. There's just no way around this, because if you want something you've never ever had, you got to do something you've never ever done. And to do that, to actually put courage into practice, you need three things. You need courage, you need conviction, and then you got to make a choice. Because what's really the alternative here? The absence of action leads to nothing. It's just an idea, even if it's a good one. Like having the cure to cancer with no inclination to get to those who are afflicted. The lack of knowledge, the great desire to act, well, I mean, that can be just reckless. And then not having any faith or conviction feels safe, but also a bit stagnant and stale. So close your eyes and think about a time you were courageous. Visualize it. I know you have a moment. And don't water it down. Don't prune and think, I got something. No, wait, actually, that wasn't as courageous as I think. Pick something in the last week alone where you demonstrated courage, everyday courage, to yourself, to your family, to your coworker, to a cause, to another woman. And just visualize, what did that look like? Feel it. What was the last straw that finally pushed you to make that choice and take action? What took that conviction to courage, to final choice for you to make that action? Now, at one point in my own life, I got a call to courage that brought me face to face with a choice of whether to be, I'll just say, courageous on behalf of myself or on behalf of another woman. And to be clear, this was no woman who needed protection from anything. She was formidable, is formidable, and is a shero in her own right. But nonetheless, like many of us, she found herself in a boardroom with bias. And that bias showed up as disrespect, as being downplayed and spoken over and disempowered and sidelined and held to a very different standard than others. And because of this, she understandably felt very alone, an island, very disconnected from the company and leadership around her. She found herself armoring up for battle every time she walked into a meeting. She found herself wondering, frankly, if she should leave. Wrong place. And while I wasn't always in the same room bearing witness to the same bias, she faced an experience that differed from my own on many levels, but honestly, it felt the same. It smelled the same. The echo of it was so familiar to me that it made me bristle, and it pissed me off. I faced a choice of whether to advocate for what I knew to be right, which in this case was equality between men and women, respect, and for bias and bullying to step outside of the boardroom and allow people to be at their best. And to me, this was worth fighting for. And so I did. I took action to make known what I thought needed to be changed. And that meant meetings with HR, my own leadership, which stressed me out because honestly, I feared that there would be some reprisal or it would reflect badly on me and have consequences. I feared I'd look like a whiner or that I couldn't take it. That it would get back to people, right? And I'd be sidelined. But I did it anyway because I couldn't live with the feeling that if I didn't, what would happen for other women around me and those who came after me. That and the whole thing just made me really mad. And in the process of being courageous, a few things happened. I learned that we were not alone in our struggle, that others who followed in our footsteps faced the same issues, that the two of us actually had way more in common than less in common and became allies and friends. I also learned that things get righted in ways that are often more quiet, intentional, but unassuming, and to trust in that. There wasn't going to be any public victory lap, and I learned to be okay with that. I learned that for me to feel like me, I needed to be connected to we. Now, often before we step up to the plate and do a courageous act, we feel it in our bones before our mind decides to do it. The ruminations and repeats are coursing through us. They're coursing through us, sometimes inching us towards action and other times taking us away from it and coaching us back into our comfort zones. When we approach a courageous choice, meaning we don't have courage of convictions, but we choose to exert our leadership to the world, there's a cadence to it. Let me illustrate through our 4 ElleExcel pillars. First, let's start with you, the me pillar. Everything starts with the me pillar. And ask yourself, like, is my desire to do this courageous act, where does it actually come from in me? How does it align with my values? And if I were to describe it to my best friend, my daughter, or my friend, how would that feel to me? Could I live with myself if I didn't take action? And then when you consider the community, the we pillar, often we go here first as women before even taking stocks of how it feels to ourselves. But the kinds of questions you ask yourself here are, who do I need, if anyone, actually, to be along the ride with me? And if I need others, what's my plan for this allyship? If I chose to do this, is it bringing me closer or further away from my chosen community, my chosen community? And if I take this stand, how will it help them? And what happens? What happens if I'm the only one? What happens if I'm the only one taking this stand? And then we give this a read, right? Like inside our bodies. We take a gauge of how this actually feels in our bodies, not after the fact, but as we step up to the plate. Because courage comes with this tax, right? It comes with a tax, an inner tax. And what tax is my body inheriting by not taking on this courageous moment? There's a question. And is my struggle with this issue keeping me awake? Is it hampering the quality of my sleep? Is my breath offering me any clues about the gravity of this choice to me and my need to do it? Or how does it feel in my body when I just envision taking a stand? How does that feel? Trepidatious, hopeful, worrisome? What is it? And if I didn't do it, or I didn't say it, how would that feel? And finally, when you act, when you actually lead, and I know you will, and you ask yourself, what actions am I aiming to take? What are the actual actions, my choices? And how will I know, right, when I've succeeded? And how do I actually define success around this piece of courage? And what does making that choice actually look like to me? What will I see? What will I feel? Or what does making that choice look like to the outer world, to the community that am I choosing? How will it be known, or how will it be seen and experienced? And how will I act? And what will I do if my choices are simply rejected or discouraged, or they're not believed in? What will I say or do when my choices result in the change I seek? That's the bright side of that movie. You'll undoubtedly find that the more courageous you are, your dreams will get bigger. And your courage will not only inspire you, but a generation of women who follow in your footsteps. And when you do that, it creates a movement. And so, speaking of movements, the word advocacy to me has movement to it, doesn't it? There's nothing sedentary about the word advocacy. It's either for something or against something, and sometimes both. Advocacy is no shout out into an empty room, because to advocate, by definition, is to act. It's public. It means to summon or call to one's aid. It's everything from a recommend to a support to a defend, all the way through to a plea and, dare I say, a stand. And let's face it, you don't do any of that unless you're passionate about it. Now, advocacy is indeed about ourselves, but it's also about something outside of ourselves, outside of us. It's about them. It's about that thing we're fighting for. And because of that, it is about us. Because advocacy connects two things together. Said another way, advocacy adds. And because of this, we're inextricably bound to the thing we're advocating for, whether it's a person or a cause. And as women, we are advocating every day of our lives for our children, for our families, for our own rights, for other women, and on occasion, even for ourselves. Amen. Where does it come from? Why does it matter so damn much? And what happens when we do it? And when we don't? What does it teach us? And what does it teach of those that come after us and are around us? And is it really even worth it? What does it feel like to advocate? And what are the consequences of choosing to do it? How do I find in me the courage to advocate? Answers to that and so much more on today's panel. And I now welcome onto the screen a power pack of advocates. Welcome. Welcome, Stephanie. Welcome, Azam. Welcome, Lisa. Now, my passion for women's empowerment is no secret. It's woven into the very fabric of who I am and what I fight for, and as it turns out, who I attract. Now, my fated introduction to Azam Jangrabi came through a male friend who, knowing our shared interest in women and analytics, suggested we meet because, let's face it, like attracts like. So sometimes when I think about advocacy, that big A advocacy, I envision a march, like some kind of standoff and people with weathered faces and clenched fists. I imagine an electricity in the veins and a will that is just unmistakable. And I imagine trailblazers and paths forged for all women. I imagine Azam. Azam is Iranian security analyst. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
She is a global human rights advocate. She's known for her courageous stand as one of the girls of ElleExcel during the Iranian protests against compulsory hijab. In 2018, she made headlines by climbing onto an electricity transformer, if you can believe this, on a street, removing her hijab and waving it as a symbol of defiance. Her peaceful protest led to an arrest, not so peaceful, and a 3-year prison sentence. And fearing that the Iranian government would take away her daughter, Azam was forced to flee her homeland. And with the support of the Canadian government, she and her daughter found refuge in Canada, where she continues to advocate for women's rights and freedom. Advocacy, big A, big A. And we all have energy that announces us before we enter a room or even utter a word. And Azam, well, she burns onto a screen. Her flame is unfailing. It emanates constant heat, the kind of heat that could flame up any moment with passion and emotion, the kind of flame that can't wait to get a word out. And the kind of flame that's with emotion and conviction and both. And damn, does it burn. Azam, it is my most sincere pleasure to know you, to learn from you, to be inspired by you, to advocate for and alongside of you, and to welcome you to BMO. This September in our data and analytics family. We could not be prouder. Now I gotta know, where in the hell does this inner flame come from?
Thank you, Lori, for inviting me. During my divorce, I realized that Iranian women have very few rights. Living in Iran, I saw that we can get divorced, have custody of our own children, or leave the country without our husband's permission. We also don't get any support from the government of Iran. I started to learn more about our society. My father introduced me to a charity that helps me to start, help me to know about people. My father introduced me to a charity that the charity helps elderly people, and I began helping those in need. During that time, I got involved in the women's rights issue. I found my voice and started speaking out about what we need and what we should do. I worked as a women's research institute to help Iranian women, and later I got involved in politics to change law. I saw many vulnerable women who had no support and were under of abuse and pressure. I wanted to help them. With my father's help, we sometimes provide some support, like financial support and therapy, to make things better for them. My father, as a man, always stood by me. I realized that in Iran's particular society, some men like my father support women and want to bring change. I learned a lot from him. His support made me stronger and encouraged me to fight for my rights. He taught me my value. He taught me my value and helped me grow. He was my best friend, my support, and a father of my daughter and many other women. He is the reason I am who I am today.
I love that it's a man empowering a woman and teaching her about female empowerment. I love that, and thank you for sharing it. And in March of this year, I had the pleasure of speaking on a Dialogue Health Women's Health panel, and Dr. Stephanie Moynihan was there, and we spoke together. And Dialogue is a phenomenal integrated health platform. You're going to see a link to it in the chat thread, and it takes proactive wellness and health to very, very new levels. And you know that feeling when you see a woman who quietly steps up to the plate, talk about quiet courage, and she kills it. And you feel this overwhelming sense of admiration and pride for who they are, the fact that they're a woman, and you just want to shout out, "You go, girl." Well, I didn't know Stephanie at the time, but that's actually how I felt. And after she sat down, I spoke to her and I was taking pictures of her slides and jotting down all the notes because what she knew both blew me away, but it also made me really mad. And she taught me that it was time to advocate for my own health care and to advocate for women's wellness differently and more boldly and broadly than I had before. And this was really the start of that advocacy journey for me. So, Stephanie, I wanted to ask you, when we seek care for our own health, we are often given or prescribed drugs or treatment, and we often trust in that care rather blindly, I would say, never really thinking about what led to it being prescribed in the first place. And I recall you're sharing some facts and research around women's health in that session and how women are represented in things like clinical trials. And I wondered if you could educate us on how women are represented.
No, absolutely. And, thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I think we were just as enamored with you on our panel back when we first met you. And so I'm glad to return the favor. And at the core of it, what I'd like to say is that women's health is women's history. And in order to understand where we are in terms of women's health, it's really important to look at the history of how we got to the point where we are today. And the most shocking thing when we look at how modern medicine was built and how most of the knowledge that we have and how we practice, particularly in Western medicine, it comes from research. It comes from information that we've gathered, that we've studied. And it's only since 1993, which to me is maybe 10 years ago, but it's actually 30 years ago, that we've actually made it mandatory to include women and underrepresented groups in clinical trials and in research. So what this means is that almost everything that we've built in terms of what we know about medicine, about healthcare, was not based on the female body. It was based on male physiology. And the reason we were excluded from these trials was the fear that hormones, for example, would influence how diseases would present. It would influence the treatment. But that's the entire point. They do influence it, and we need to know how and why and what we can do about it. And so all this exclusion did was make it so that we don't know how most diseases will present in 50% of the population. We don't know how our treatments are going to work in 50% of the population. And so this has had significant downstream effects into what we see now as the reality in healthcare, particularly, for example, with cardiovascular disease and diabetes, which are two significant diseases that cause a lot of comorbidity and healthcare costs and decrease in quality of life. And cardiovascular disease, which is the example I'd given at the panel, is one of the most shocking ones, where cardiovascular disease presents differently in men than in women. Not for everybody, but as a rule, that sort of dramatic chest pain radiating down the left arm that we see in movies is a presentation we'll often see in men versus in women. It tends to be more subtle. The symptoms will be more, indigestion, nausea, fatigue, jaw pain, symptoms that will generally kind of get under-recognized, not seen as cardiovascular disease symptoms. So people won't get properly screened, assessed, and treated for heart disease. And even risk factors that we'll see more often in women. So relating to, for example, different issues in pregnancy, relating to menopause, are not seen as indicators of heart disease. And so people also are not screened as often. And so what this means, and one study that really shocked me was showing that 64% of women that died from heart disease had no previous symptoms. And I don't think that's correct. I think they had symptoms and they were not recognized as heart disease symptoms because we don't, we were not trained to recognize those symptoms in medicine. And this is something that really needs to change. And what we see now in the Canadian landscape, for example, is cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for Canadian women, with 1 in 3 women that are going to die from heart disease. Even though men are diagnosed twice as often with heart disease, even though they're diagnosed 10 years earlier and live with heart disease much longer than women, they're twice as likely to survive having a first heart attack than women. And these numbers are even more significant when we look at, for example, Indigenous women and certain cultures of women in Canada with the impact of colonization, where the impact of heart disease is even stronger. And it's really unacceptable that we continue to continue on this pathway without trying to level the playing field.
This is the part at which, when you spoke last, I just was enraged. Because not only are you not feeling well and you step up to the plate to actually go to the doctor to get counsel, and you're reading your body and your symptoms, but the very read on those symptoms are not interpreted because the entire infrastructure behind them is flawed and biased. And we live in that every day, where we're mining data and looking at bias within and trying to eradicate it. But the very body in which we live in has a flaw in the way in which it's being diagnosed, and at a very fundamental level that affects not only our wellness but our longevity. And I know that I'm going to stay with you for one moment, but knowing the inherent bias, right, and in how trials are set up, what are the implications for us as women for key health risks like cancer, like neurology, even classic women's issues such as menopause, endometriosis, and autoimmune disease?
No, and you'd mentioned cancer and neurology specifically. And while we've made really great strides in inclusion in research, cancer and neurology are actually the two areas where we fall short in inclusion of women. We're pretty much at 50% on almost everything except those two, based on what is studied and how they recruit. And then other issues such as menopause, endometriosis, autoimmune diseases that either disproportionately, uniquely, or differently affect women, they're underfunded. So they're not seen as important to invest in and research. Without funding, we have no research. So if people aren't interested or not investing in, putting money into these trials, we will not be able to do anything about it. And I remember talking with a colleague who's a psychiatrist in Montreal, and she was working on a research project looking at mood symptoms and mental health disorders associated with menopause. And they were looking at the impact of menopause hormone treatment to help these symptoms. And it was really promising. And, at the stage we are now, menopause hormone therapy is actually not approved. We know it does help the symptoms with menopause, but it's not actually an approved indication to start it for just those symptoms. It's approved only for hot flashes and vasomotor symptoms. And that funding for that trial was actually pulled. And they don't actually think that they're ever going to get it back. And it's such a shame because it was so promising, and it's what we need to be able to actually figure out, what are the best treatments, what are the risks associated with, and actually be able to recommend a solid treatment. And so that's the reality that we're faced with if people aren't investing in different trials and research. And the same thing for endometriosis. We have 6 out of 10 cases that are not diagnosed. And part of it is that we don't have good diagnostic tests. You need to actually cut somebody open and look to diagnose endometriosis. And for those who don't know, endometriosis is a disease where the lining of the uterus, those cells grow outside of the uterus and can cause really debilitating period pains, other general symptoms like fatigue and migraines. And a lot of the times, even just a stigma surrounding talking about symptoms that are associated with having a period. People assume it's normal and they won't talk about it, or they feel that it's something that they have to deal with, that it's just part of their biology and it's something normal. And so people are also not recognize it in themselves, that this is maybe it's not normal that I spend 3 weeks out of 4 in debilitating pain. It's not just normal periods, but we don't talk about these things. Same thing with menopause symptoms, where, this is just something I have to deal with. It's normal. I should be doing everything else that everyone else is doing on top of these symptoms that I have. And then healthcare providers don't necessarily help, where sometimes people will have the courage to bring up the symptoms and people will say, no, that's normal. There's nothing medical about it. And that's not very often not the case, and that just perpetuates the stigma. And so it's education for people to advocate for their self. If you feel that something is wrong and you're talking about it and you're not being heard, find a different provider, learn more about yourself, advocate. And that's where we're going to be able to move forward. So same thing with autoimmune diseases. They're very vague symptoms that can take usually 6 to 10 years before a diagnosis is actually placed, because a lot of them are just minimized, where, it's normal to be tired, it's normal to have joint pain, it's normal to have hair loss, and people are just not recognizing them as symptoms and living through all of these years. And when we look at, McKinsey came up with a survey just recently that showed that women, we might live longer on average, about 4 to 5 years in Canada, but in 25% worse health. So those years are not healthy years. We spent an average of 9 years, almost a full decade, in poor health. So more chronic diseases, more comorbidity, poor mental health, and even when we look at what we call like looking at longevity, so the how long you live versus how healthy you live, those additional years are mostly based on premature deaths, for example, that men are more likely to do based on previous risk factors with smoking that are actually tending to they're leveling off. And so that even that increase in longevity by 2030 is expected to start reversing. So it's really important right now to take action so that we don't suffer even further in terms of health.
Absolutely. And all the more reason to advocate for your care, learn about it, talk about it, dig into it, educate yourself before going to a doctor and in the process of getting treatment to make sure that you're armored up with the right facts. Now, switching gears for a moment, because so many of us, we are advocating every day at work, actually for the causes and projects and people we believe in. And often this is running against unpopular tides. For some leaders, like Lisa Milburn, who is BMO's Chief Operating Officer of Legal, Regulatory Compliance and Procurement, you're often on the side choosing stuff that's, let's just say, it's like less popular than what folks are looking for. And to get things done, you need a combination of push and draw. You are at the same time that you're porous and you're also listening. And I've seen and also been on the receiving end of Lisa's superior influencing skills. And I have also bared witness to her advocacy and action for others. And once she reached out to me to ensure that I knew of someone's greatness because they may well get lost in the shuffle of a merger. And she wanted to ensure that that never happened. She was purposeful in ensuring that this happened before year end. So her feedback and about this individual's greatness had the chance to be witnessed and rewarded. And she made sure that that happened. Because in corporate settings, we need advocates like this. We need people with both competence and courage, those who speak up with authority, but who also stick their necks out for others. These diamonds are hard to find, right? But if you meet one, and if you meet Lisa, you will know you found one. And thank you, Lisa, for being with us today, and welcome to ElleExcel.
Thanks so much, Lori.
Now, tell us, why is advocacy so important to you, and where does this belief come from?
I do think advocacy is a passion. And for me, I've always thought of myself a little bit as an underdog. And especially as I went into the working world and developing a career, from my perspective, I grew up in a house of 6 kids, blue collar parents, and not a lot of money. And so it was really an ethic of hard work and support. That was what had me think about who I was, what I could do, what was possible. But also my parents always instilled this belief in me that you can do anything you set your mind to. And so no matter what, your level of income, your level of privilege, your access was, having that inner belief is something that is wired inside of me. And so I've always loved to try new things. Even as a kid, it was whatever my friends were doing. If they were horseback riding, if they were playing hockey instead of ringette, if they were dancing, whatever it was, I always wanted to try it. It was something that I wanted to see, okay, can I do this? And with a real focus on discipline and a competitive edge, it was, how can I really focus on, getting good at something? And I think as I went into my career, you see that just in how important it is to have advocates, whether it's your leader, whether it's positive reinforcement from a feedback perspective, peer-to-peer feedback. It's what motivates. It is what wires people to say, okay, I can do this. I can do more. I can do different things. I can be better. I can grow. And so for me, if I had like a personality t-shirt on it, it would say, how can I help you? It really is what I believe and the way I show up at work. And as a leader, I actually think it's one of the most important things that we do as our job, spotting talent, finding people that want to do more, being able to motivate and encourage them to build courage, just like your opener, to turn courage into confidence, but then at the same time to do that not just within your team, to do it across our company, because that's what makes us stronger, and that's what gets people the ability to grow, do more.
Love
But
it.
you need advocates. You need advocates to fuel motivation and courage, but also to help people get to the next level.
Yeah, I love it. It's almost like advocacy as a life of service, or life of service results in advocacy. And along those same lines, Stephanie, it's a delicate choice to put your weight behind something or someone, as we've talked about, because advocacy is action. So what was it about health and advocating for women's health that woke up the spirit in you and your choice to make a vocation of that?
No, I say that the short answer is my Myers-Briggs personality is ENFPA. I'm an assertive campaigner, and it just fits. And it's funny talking about medicine. I don't think I've had to answer this question since I was applying to med school. And in the last week, I've had 3 different people ask me in different, conferences, events, meeting new colleagues, why did you go into medicine?
Mm.
And the answer is more, I didn't so much. It chose me, and I didn't so much choose to go into it as I chose to actively stop fighting against it. And it's a very hard concept to illustrate and explain in words, but I don't come from a medical family. My parents are in finance. Everyone else is, an engineer, a trade worker, a police officer. I mean, anything that is not medical. I was exposed to medicine just as a child. I always had ear infections. I was sick. I was allergic to absolutely everything. And it just became a normal part of my reality. I used to love playing with my Fisher-Price medical kit, and I was very good in school, and I think everyone just assumed I would go into medicine. But I was a very artistic child. I loved art. I loved drawing. I loved crafting. I was not going to go into medicine. I wanted to go into art. And in high school, when we had to, at the end of high school, we had to create a project on like, what's your ideal job, and write a whole report on like why our skills are suited to it. I came up with medical illustrator. I made the entire thing up. I'd never even heard of that profession, but it kind of like combined art and medicine. I got an A+. But it was never an actual reality. And then when I had to apply to CEGEP, I picked arts and science. So I wanted to continue doing theater and arts, but I couldn't really let the science part go. And then when I was applying to university, House was a really popular TV show at the time. And Cameron, who's the female doctor, I thought she was so cool, and she was an immunologist. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go into immunology. So I applied for an undergrad, and it was research-based, and I was in the honors program. So I spent a full year in the research lab giving mice influenza and studying them. And I realized I need to interact with people. I want to help people. I need to go into medicine.
Mm.
And so I applied, and I did it in secret, mind you. I didn't tell anyone. My parents didn't know. I did it. I got in, and it fit, and I've never looked back. And it's given me a voice. And as you go through medicine and you learn different things, and you find kind of where I've always been that advocate for people in all different departments. I work with transgender medicine, I work with, BIPOC communities, and it's just always been something innate in me. And I have kind of the skills, the knowledge, and the privilege through being a doctor to be able to affect that change. And I've just used it.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a way of turning sort of a passion into a purpose, but also being open, right, along the way to what it is your body and your experiences are telling you and guiding you towards. And Lisa, I've often heard leaders talk about advocacy, like you need more advocates. And like it's a shopping spree, right? Go on Amazon. It's important to get people who advocate for you, you're told. And it seems to me that it's a lot like shopping, right? Like shopping for a mentor. But that it's rather an elusive thing, because you want it, but you don't want to have to ask for it. And if you have it, but sometimes you don't know whether the person will actually stand up for you when you're outside a room and represent you when you're really just not there. So many of us on the line here are in corporate roles, and we need advocacy. We do actually, to progress, in fact, to be even seen sometimes. And so while it might sound unusual, how do you get it? What are your quick tips on how you get it? And how do you know when you have it?
So let me take the second part of your question first. How do you know when you have it? Because it is happening and it feels good. I think you said in your intro, advocacy, it's something you can feel whether it is happening, because it does. It fills your motivational jar. If you don't know if you have it, you probably don't, to be honest, right? Because you should feel that advocacy in action. You have to ask for it. It doesn't have to be as bold as, are you my advocate? it could start with, I'm going into this meeting. It's really important opportunity to share this. Will you support me? Will you vocally support me in this conversation? That can be another way in to start to build advocacy to a point that then you can get to a leader to then turn advocacy into sponsorship, right? There's kind of that spectrum of advocacy and support. And then the last thing I'd say is there's nothing better than fueling advocacy than being an advocate yourself. So if you want it for you, who are you doing it for? So role model what advocacy is around your tables and your meetings with your teams, with people, your peers, with people that are in more junior roles, and advocacy will feed more advocacy.
Yeah, I like that subtlety between support and advocacy, because it can be, you can support somebody. It's great, like give them an atta girl, or yeah, I really think that you should get that budget. And then you get in the room and the question's asked, who supports this? And it's crickets.
Right.
And those are the piss me off moments where I'm like, are you supporting me, or are you advocating? Are you in this, or are you out of this? And it feels almost like you're navigating your way through political landmines. And so I think what I learned from that, and having walked into those sharp objects before, is there's a choice there, but you're saying what advocacy would look if you advocate for me, or if you support this. What it looks like to me in that room is when so-and-so asks, do you support, that you stand up and say why it's meaningful. It looks like that. It behaves like that. There's words around it. You characterize the action. So thank you for that, for distinguishing that. And Azam, you have a 13-year-old daughter, and you've spent time helping vulnerable women and girls in different shelters, and you spoke about that in your experience with your dad. But talk to us, if you could, about the responsibility you feel for paving the way for the future of women and girls, and what do you want us to know to be part of this advocacy path?
Thank you for this question. As a mother of 13-year-old daughter, and someone who has worked with vulnerable women and girls, I feel a deep responsibility to pave the way for a better future for them. I have seen many young girls, some young as 13 or 14, who have suffered from sexual abuse and have no support from the government. Many are forced into marriage by their families. Hearing their story broke my heart. And with the help of some women and my father, I tried to support them. At the shelter, I met a 13-year-old girl who had been raped 3 times by her grandfather, who was her guardian. Helping her made me realize that children, like women in Iran, have no rights. I strive to be a voice for them and to help them in any way in Iran. We need to create a safe place for the next generation, a place that brings peace and happiness. Right now, I feel my daughter is safe, because as a mother, I can see my daughter always happy. But you can't see in Iran, women and girls are not happy. Our children deserve to be happy without any sadness or worry. I hope to see a future where our children live in a world full of joy and free from sorrow. To be a part of this advocacy path, we need to listen to these stories, like that girl, support these children, and work together to change the laws and society and that allow such injustices to happen. Let's create better world to our daughters and all the girls who deserve a brighter future.
You're so inspiring. And I think that sometimes we are busy making change and take for granted our privilege, to even take for granted our safety, the basic safety, and entrusting your body and your health into a family member. And some of the experiences that you've had and that you share are just like they're very sobering, and you realize that there in the world there's such discrepancy of haves and have-nots, and things that are of grave concern, and then others that are of smaller concern. And we forget there's a common thread in it as women being safe and being safely regarded and being treated fairly. But the vastness of that is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So thank you for having the courage to even tell us about it. And it's not that we don't know, but I think sometimes you want to just think, oh, that's somewhere else, or that no longer happens, or it doesn't happen here. It just happens differently, but it still damn well happens. And it's women like you who stand up and advocate for change around that and have the courage to say that not here, like not on our watch, not on our generation, enough. And so kudos to you for even having the courage to do that. And I'm going to switch gears for one moment and talk a little bit back about the health advocacy element. And Stephanie, when I hear you, speaking of anger, when I hear you talk about clinical trial bias and how healthcare is often based off the needs of men versus the needs of women, there is a part of me that's very enraged by that, because my treatment of my own body is at risk. And so I feel kind of hopeless, I will say, like we're caught up in this big sort of machine, right? Between the government and drug companies and political leaders and all the rest, who don't see the grave inequities that are at play at that level, and the consequences of those bias to one's health, like the health of a nation, the equality of a nation. And so I wondered what your thoughts were on that, given that you live that each day, and what you think is needed to empower women and make positive change given those realities.
No, and it's such an important discussion to be having. And the same applies, like we're looking at the healthcare aspect of it, but the social aspect, the gender aspect. So, at every facet of a woman's life. So healthcare is one part of it. And we call it the biopsychosocial model as well. So your social reality is going to influence your health reality and your biological reality. And it's easy to get overwhelmed and discouraged when you look at sort of the mountain we need to climb in order to kind of achieve that equity at all levels. But we also need to step back and see how far we've already climbed in terms of women's rights, and that we got to where we are today with single steps and single voices that combined to help propel movements and lasting changes. We saw it happen with Me Too. We saw it happen with so many different things. We saw it happen with the inclusion of, finally in 1993, when we finally got women in research. And even if you are one person, you never know who you will reach and what kind of butterfly effect will ensue. And so it's just really important to always keep trying, even if you don't think you're necessarily going to have a huge impact. And the very first thing that I always encourage people to do, and the first step in any change, is just it's awareness and education. And whether that's just sort of learning about your reality so that you can advocate for yourself or for the people around you who might not be able to advocate as well. And this applies to everybody, not just, for example, women advocating for themselves, but men, non-binary people, allies need to come together with the same message. And this can be, talking to people around you. It can be using your social media. It can be talking to your colleagues and your work environment, your human resources department. Just see sort of what you can do with your skills, your opportunities, whatever types of privilege you might have. What's a small concrete action that you can do to change? So, we're talking about things that are underfunded in research. Maybe you can't do anything to change the government, but you can donate to an organization that's supporting a cause that is important to you. You can talk about it and you can share that information. And at the end of the day, even if the one person that you help is yourself, that's already one person that is having a better life because of this. And it's what I find discouraging also is, and you have to be very careful, there's a lot of good with social media, and there's a lot of bad and disinformation, and a lot of people, particularly in the healthcare sphere, that are preying on this vulnerability that has been kind of noticed in women who are suffering. And, everyone is now a healthcare influencer and an expert in any topic. And so it's very hard to also find when you're trying to learn about these things, who are the trusted sources that I'm, going to listen to. And sometimes, credentials are very helpful. And it's definitely the first step. But what I always warn people is just to see, is this person benefiting from me in some way with the information that they're sharing? There's a lot of fear mongering. There's a lot of preying on the fact that, there's shame surrounding, being a woman, having certain symptoms, menopause, parent shaming that we'll see a lot on different blogs. And a lot of it is coming from sometimes other women, which is really hard to sort of internalize misogyny in that regard. And it's just saying, is someone saying that, everything is all of this, if you're doing this, it's all bad. If you're doing this, it's all good. Everything is toxic. Is it a very black and white thinking? Are they trying to sell me something? Are they benefiting from it? And at the end of the day, that's a major red flag. And so, someone who's actually educating to educate is not benefiting more than just this sharing of knowledge. So, for example, Dr. Jen Gunter, who's a physician who's from Canada, now in the US, has written incredible books about, menopause, about your period, in a way that is really just to communicate evidence-based, practical healthcare information. And it's sort of sharing any, good sources of information so that what's normal. And we don't even, we're talking about, learning about diseases that you might have, but we're not even talking about learning about the realities of just simply being a woman or having this type of body that's going through things.
Awesome. Thank you. Powerful and good advice. And it starts with one, and one is enough. One is enough to start a domino. All the dominoes falling, and it's also enough to start a hell of an echo. Now, through ElleExcel, we've explored the idea of what makes each of us remarkable as a hallmark for self-confidence, a nod to all that we do. And as hard as it is to say in a couple words, what makes you remarkable, Lisa?
High empathy. I can tell how a person is feeling just by reading their body language.
Oh, I love that. Azam, what makes you remarkable?
I think always I want to be a good role model for my daughter, and she has seen I try to be strong always, and I think it is.
You're strong. Stephanie, what makes you remarkable?
That's always the question, isn't it? Where, women are always kind of trained to see where they're deficient as opposed to where they particularly excel at. And I'm victim of that, even when applying for jobs in the history. But I would just say where I'm remarkable and where everyone is remarkable is that I'm unequivocally with myself, with my skills and my abilities and my voice. And I've recognized how I can use those things to help people and make a positive change in the world.
Perfect. Now, Lisa, companies are fickle. Tides change, people and leaders change, and sometimes it feels like you're only as good as your last quarter, your last review, your last project, if you will. And so, have you ever been in a situation where you are advocating for the wrong cause or the wrong person, and what'd you do about that?
Yes, and it's gut-wrenching, especially as a highly emotive person, when you realize that, oh my goodness, maybe this person wasn't so deserving of my advocacy, is always tough. And so I have been in that situation. And I'd say not only does it impact how you feel about the situation, it can impact your personal brand too at the same time. And so for me, what I learned from that was that need with advocacy to balance head and heart. So if I lead with my heart, clearly you can all feel that, I think, through the screen, but I have to balance that with the head. What's the facts? What's the evidence you need to see to be comfortable to be a vocal advocate? How do you make sure you have both? But also, how do you make sure that the person you're advocating for is also vested in what they're looking for? Because you can advocate for someone potentially in the wrong direction if it doesn't align with what they want to do, where they want to go, or the type of feedback that they're looking for. And so really making sure that you are witnessing what you need to see to be an advocate, and then having the courage to do it. lastly, I'd say, and again, time and time, I think women are great at this as well. Listen to your gut. There's sometimes you have warning signs, that spidey sense. If that starts to tingle and go off, that maybe there's questions around my advocacy here. You got to listen to it. And lastly, I just say advocacy needs to be reciprocal, right? If you are advocating for someone and then your advocate comes around to ask you to help pay that forward for someone else in their network, you're hoping that that community of support carries through, that you're then also seeing the power of it to pay it forward. So
Love that.
I kind of
Thank
think
you.
about it all in those sweats.
Amazing. I like the trust your gut. My best friend Mel says that to me all the time. As a recovering logician, I'm trying. So the cost of advocacy is now you said in the quote reel, I believe in the power of standing up for what's right, even when it comes at a great personal cost. But the cost that you bore to stand up for women's rights are something that probably very few of us on the line will ever understand or know. You were sentenced to 3 years and spent time in jail. Your daughter was taken away from you. You suffered great, great personal stress and ridicule and were ostracized by those you love, by your country. You were exiled from your country. That the cost, let me just say, of advocacy was just, I mean, it was enormous, right? It's something we don't recognize. So why? Like, why do it? And did you think any of this would happen when you set out to do it? And if you did, would you do it again?
Always people ask this question from me. Actually, if I could go back in time, I would do it all again because it was worth it. I was just an ordinary woman who, didn't know her rights. One day I decided to change my life because of my daughter. I wanted to be a good role model for her. It was a very difficult decision. I lost most of my friends. I tried to learn more and stay active. I became lonely because most of my friends and also some of my family were scared of the Iranian government because because of me they under lots of pressure from the government of Iran. So I had to flee Iran without any family or support. I had to start from my life from exactly zero in a new place where, I didn't know English at all. But I managed to change my circle, find new friends, and build my life here. Standing up for what's right, even at a great personal cost, was incredibly challenging. The fear and reality of being alone without friends, family, uh, it's really tough. It's really tough, but it's became me to bear. Despite this, I would do it again. I changed my circle. Started with my, I started to my brothers and my father and the other of my circle. Through my actions, I became a female reader, and some people say you're our hero in Iran. Um, you know, the most important things, it's as I said to you, one day my father said, you are my hero. And this is the most important things, because always I thought learned from him. And one day he said, I am his hero.
I think you're a lot of people's heroes. And I know think it's the BBC, is it? Don't they also think you're a hero? What you got cooking with them? Maybe you don't want to talk about it, but give us a taste.
Could you please repeat again?
Yeah, the mini series. I think they're looking at doing a profile on you and your courage.
Yeah.
That's humility in action. I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone like you. Let me just say full stop. I do not have the privilege of knowing anyone like you. But every bloody time I sit down to talk to you, you blow me away. And I don't know, not only that, but I don't know if anyone would say I'd do it all again. I'd do the same thing again. And that to me is like, yeah, I mean, that is standing behind what you believe in and breaking ground and doing it for the broader good. And it's just so I don't know how to, it's so inspiring. So thank you for firstly standing up for women, and thank you for continuing to share and being courageous enough. And I hope you don't have to do it again. But thank you for breaking the way for that so that others of us can.
But
And
can I say something,
yeah,
Lori? Many Iranian women, after some of us, we started this movement. After us, 2 years ago, we had a big demonstration in Iran that today exactly the anniversary of that day. Today exactly the anniversary of the movement of women, life, freedom of Iran. And so many women protested against mandatory hijab and do this. This is the way that all women support each other and continue this way.
yeah, it starts with one, like your illustration of Stephanie's point, which is so beautiful in these kind of conversations. One chooses to remove the hijab, another chooses, and so on and so on, and it becomes a day to celebrate women. So thank you. And I know this women's circle in many ways is about bringing women together and having this what I'll call a constellation of support, which includes people, no question. And I call that our power pack, right? So could you share with us who is your power pack and community of support? What's in your power pack? Doesn't only have to be people, it's tools and things that you do to feel support. Where do you go? And what do you do to refuel when you need it? And we all need it. And where do you get that level of support? Lisa?
Me first, I'd say close friends, family, and my dog. I would start with from relationship perspective, nature, exercise, and just being silly and laughing are part of my power pack. And then lastly, I'd say on the thinking side, really, I love podcasts. I love kind of learning more, listening, and learning along the way. And so that coupled with then deep discussions with my friends and family about what I've learned and what I'm thinking is also great. So that would be my power pack.
Love that. Zam, what's in your power pack?
Family and my new friends, and I also do meditation and workout because when I'm very, very nervous, it helps me.
Absolutely. Stephanie?
Yeah, so I mean, people are definitely the power pack, and I mean, I went to an all girls school. We have very closeness. I've always been surrounded by a sisterhood, and I'm very fortunate that my chosen family is there for me, but also my actual family. I had phenomenal role models within my family. My mother, who is just absolutely incredible, and she organized what's called the ladies' brunch in our family, and so. Every couple of months, all of the women in our family get together for a full day. We start with brunch. We talk about our successes, our lives, our challenges, and then we finish it off with a little bit of retail therapy and a coffee. And it's just spending the whole day together. And it's everyone from all ages, from 5-year-olds to 80-year-olds. And it's just kind of everyone bringing together and sharing in our value and our collective. And it's one of our favorite events every year.
In our family, we call that group of women the Yayas, named after the movie Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. So the Yayas have traveled all over the world. And then at one point there was a mutiny among our partners, and they said, why can't we come? And we're like, well, you're the yo-yos. You can't organize yourselves out of a paper bag. My mother was running it like a military operation where you had to show up or you'd be out of the club. So it forced us to become part of the yayas. But I love it. I mean, women find their way to each other. And I wanted to say here on self-advocacy and this whole idea of self-worth, and Lisa, this one's for you, but what I believe is that to advocate for oneself means you have to believe in your own self-worth, right? It comes from that me pillar, it comes from inside. And I think there's this belief, I think, that the higher you go in an organization, the more confident you simply are in yourself, and that there may well be some truth to that. Let's say you've learned a few things because potentially we care less maybe about what others think or more. Sometimes we believe that with progression, that in time, that the voices in our heads die down a little bit, and those feelings, let's say, of self-doubt are go away, or maybe they no longer have that sense that I'm not good enough because I'm at the top of my game. I don't know. So I know for me on any given Monday, I'll be honest with you, self-doubt can go from a whisper to a roar, and sometimes even drawing up my words and self-confidence in the moment. So am I alone in this? Is this resonating? How's it for you?
Not alone, totally resonates. Negative self-talk. Sometimes I think it can quiet when you're older, but I think it's more just it gets refocused on different things. And so maybe you would had more negative self-talk when you were younger from a career and confidence perspective. Maybe as you get older, your negative self-talk comes into, can I help my parents as they age in the right way? Can I think about how to support my kids as they become adults? How am I dealing with relationships? So I do think it is always there. It just maybe the focus changes a little bit. What I work on myself, because this has been one of my challenges for sure, is I try to actually take my inner voice and then use my outer voice to say something positive. And my family thinks I'm crazy at times, that I like, are you talking to yourself? But I actually am. So it might sound a little bit bizarre, but coming out of meetings and then being able to say, okay, you killed that. And I'm not doing it in my head. I'm actually saying it quietly to myself, has helped me.
I like
so
that. I like
that's
it.
been one of the
You're
ways
bearing witness to your own greatness. I love it. And Stephanie, yeah, no, why not? I mean, if not us, then who? Right? And the best thing that could happen is someone could overhear you and go, yeah, you did. And so Stephanie, I know wellness is a big part of your life at home, obviously, and at work as a doctor. And but what's your quick script for women's wellness? What are the key things each of us must do well to be well?
That is the key. The key question to answer. I would say the first thing is really, and like we've mentioned several times, just listen to yourself. Learn about yourself from trusted sources so that you can advocate for yourself in terms of your health, in terms of everything in your life. And listen to other people's stories so that you can advocate for them as well. And biologically, we're wired to look for the bad and look for the dangers so that we can survive. So it's really important because it's the mind-body connection, and it's really important to intentionally look for the good, be grateful for what you have, what brought you joy, and give yourself that same grace and permission to take care of yourself that you might do for others. And we've seen in so many studies on happiness, how can we achieve that, or how can I feel this sense of satisfaction? And helping others has always been one of the key messages that has always come up in these studies. Even looking at people's perception of how much time they have in their day, the busiest people would rate their day as having more time if they use part of that time to help somebody else within their day, which is extremely powerful. It doesn't have to be anything big. And they were looking at, what do you do when you feel stuck, let's say professionally, and you don't know what to do within your day? Sometimes it's just saying, can I just take a break, help somebody else on something? And that tends to inspire people to continue. And it's just really important to consciously integrate this regularly in your day-to-day life, because your brain is not going to do it for you. You have to make it a habit. And that's what's going to have the best results over time.
You got it. Intention meets habit meets action. I like it. And then it becomes kind of a cadence. And so, Azam, can I just ask you, what are 2 things you do to care for yourself?
Always, I try to believe myself, and I think the most important things we have to always believe. We have to always believe ourselves. When you think about some things, you can achieve it. I believe we have to try it, and then we achieve to our goals. And the second things, always try to be positive. And when I have lots of challenges, I try to change the environment with dancing, listening to happy music, pop music, and dance. Just dancing to change the environment and show my daughter I'm very good, I'm very well, and there is no matter here. Just be yourself and be happy. Sometimes life has down and up, and we have to accept everything, and so we have to be positive.
Yeah, the dancer, you draw out the dancer from within. I like it. And Lisa, what are 2 things you do to care for yourself?
Similar themes: happiness, what's making me happy versus how do I make everybody else happy, has been a big focus for me right now, and making sure that I'm spending time to do that, to actually live life. It's amazing how time can fly by, and you realize, oh my goodness, what did I do for myself? So those are the 2 things that I work on right now.
Love it. All right. And now to all of you in this order, I'm going to say, for women to excel, what do you think we need to stop doing and start doing? Lisa, what do we need to stop doing and start doing?
Stop talking about advocacy and do it.
I love that. So that's a wrap. Yeah. Azam, what do we need to start doing and stop doing?
I think women needs to stop doubting themselves and start believing their abilities.
Like it. Stephanie?
Yeah, I would say stop getting in your own way and start taking up space in the world.
Oh, I love that. You guys have great answers. We could write a book. All right. Now, I wanted to just thank you. I feel more empowered already. I will just say I feel courageous. There's a layer of hope, but also like a healthy skepticism about what are all the things, the dragons we need to wrangle in order to get this in order. And thank you for each of your own individual courageousness. Thank you for being courageous on behalf of the collective and those on the screen. I hope as you settle into this next segment, you're going to have the chance to read the chat thread. It's blowing up. There's a lot of love out there for all of you, and support for the courage you've shown, for the lessons you've taught us. So please take a chance to read it. And now I'm going to take this whole notion of sort of inner wellness and give us some tools on how it is that we care for ourselves. And so you'll see our panelists disappear from the screen. And now for our wellness break. Our environment is filled with toxins. The air we breathe, the products we put on our bodies, the food that we eat. Is it possible to avoid? In fact, in the last 70 years alone, nearly 100,000 new chemicals have been released into the environment through our food and water supply. And at least 85% of these chemicals have never even been tested for their health effects on humans. Among those that have been tested, as many as 800 chemicals are either known or suspected to negatively impact our health, especially on our hormones. And hormones, well, they're central to everything. To put a finer point on it, we consume on average annually 14 pounds of food additives, including coloring, preservatives, flavoring, emulsifiers, and microplastics. An estimated 1 billion of pesticides are used in the US alone every year, and the average person is exposed to 100 synthetic chemicals every single day. In our shampoo, in our deodorant, in our cleaning products, our hair dye, our cosmetics, our skin lotion, dishwashing soap, and the list just goes on. But Jillian, you say that despite this very dire outlook, there is hope that we can actually do something about this. But before we get into the specific strategies around that, what deems it a toxin and why are they so bad?
Lori, toxins are chemical compounds that are foreign to our body. And many of the common toxins that we are exposed to on a daily basis disrupt hormone function, as you've mentioned, especially in women. These toxins are called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs for short. And what's scary about them is that they mimic our natural hormones and they scramble the communication between our cells.
Well, this takes me back to the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and the fear of the hormonies. I digress, but I've heard xenoestrogens. Is this an example of a hormone disrupting chemical?
Yeah, exactly. So xenoestrogens mimic estrogen, and there are many different types of toxins that do this. And not only that, they are really easily absorbed into our bodies. And because we have estrogen receptors throughout our body and brain, these receptors end up getting mixed messages, and this triggers hormonal imbalances in our reproductive system. So things like premature puberty, miscarriages, infertility, even endometriosis, these have all been linked to xenoestrogens. And sadly, this is just one of the many types of hormone disruptors. Hundreds of these chemicals are also toxic to our brain. They can affect our immune system, and they're linked to many cancers.
Yeah, all the more reason to avoid them. And sometimes it's hard to recognize what the real toxins are. What are they in plain language? Tell us, please, and how can we recognize them?
Well, the primary EDCs are a lot of chemicals that we already know about. So, for example, BPA, that's found in both plastics as well as the inner lining of canned foods, and phthalates, which are found in so many of our body care products and our fragrances. But they're also found in certain plastics like vinyl flooring, shower curtains, food packaging, and kids' toys, even kids' soothers. Flame retardants in our clothing, our furniture, rugs, and our carpets, even in our nail polish. Insecticides and pesticides, obviously they're found in our foods and in our gardens, but they're even found in random things like bug spray. And coatings in many of our pots and pans that are released when they're heated. And of course, cigarette smoke is a really bad one. And these chemicals are generally stored in our body fat, and women have more fat tissue than men. Hence, we accumulate these at higher levels. And often the highest concentration is found in our breast tissue, which research has shown correlates with an increased risk of breast cancer.
I didn't know that. And it obviously begs the question, I think we all have, is how do we actually reduce this toxic load? Because it's pervasive, it's everywhere. And how can our body, like perhaps our liver, help us out?
Well, the best way is to take steps to reduce or remove the toxins that we're exposed to. And yes, to answer your question, the liver plays a key role because it's a detoxification organ. What it does is it pulls toxins from various parts of our body, obviously including from our fat where the EDCs are stored, and then it transforms them from being dangerous to being as benign as possible. Then they're either excreted from our body or they're reabsorbed. Regardless, it's a big job and we must keep our liver healthy for it to work properly.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do we start with a healthy liver?
One of the best ways is to eat cruciferous vegetables. So think broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, bok choy, cabbage. There's a whole slew of them, as well as allium vegetables. These are from the onion family. So things like garlic, onions, leeks, and scallions. They all contain sulfur compounds, which have huge detoxifying properties, especially in the liver. And at the same time, they increase something called glutathione, which is our body's internal antioxidant, which is essential for detoxification.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I've also read that other things we want to include are antioxidants, polyphenols, and B vitamins in particular. And they're all found in, of course, whole foods and a really good Mediterranean approach to eating. These colorful fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, and other healthy proteins.
Now, absolutely, because these foods not only neutralize the free radicals created by toxins, they actually contain the nutrients that play a role in the functioning of our liver.
Yeah, and we know we want to avoid or minimize highly saturated foods. Everybody knows this, the sugar, the ultra-processed foods, because too much sugar and saturated fat leads to a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And many processed foods, of course, contain chemicals and toxins, to your point, that both enhance the taste, but also keep them shelf stable. And plus, they're always in some kind of plastic. I think you alluded to that earlier. And these packaging can also, of course, leach toxins. So aside from this and maybe alcohol avoidance, what else can we do to keep our liver healthy?
We really want to reduce or avoid acetaminophen, which is the active ingredient in Tylenol, because you'll find it in about 200 other products like cough and cold medications and muscle relaxants. They are definitely harmful if they're to our liver if they're taken too frequently. And of course, we never want to mix acetaminophen with alcohol.
All right, I got it. Okay, so take an average day. We want to reduce this toxic load daily. And as skin is, of course, the largest organ, I want to start there with creams and makeup, sunblock, laundry soap, all the things that get absorbed through our skin.
Yes, unfortunately, these products are often full of chemicals. We really have to start reading labels to avoid the things like phthalates, formaldehyde, and parabens. And if the product has a fragrance, I strongly suggest avoiding it as well and getting unscented. Prime example would be scented laundry soap. Fragrance is full of chemicals that don't have to be listed on the product, nor do they have to be approved. And while we're on the topic of clothing and laundry, please toss your dryer sheets in the garbage. All they do is wrap your clothes in a layer of chemicals. And if you can, you want to wash new clothes before you wear them, as they are often sprayed with formaldehyde to enhance texture and to prevent mildew. They also contain or can contain dyes, flame retardants, and a slew of other chemicals.
Oh, I didn't know that. And speaking of cleaning, why not go an all natural route? With unscented cleaning supplies, vinegar, water, baking soda. We've heard these, with a couple of drops of maybe essential oil to if you want that fragrance. But now, Jillian, what about chemicals we breathe in our environment? Could they be the source of some headaches, for example?
They absolutely can. For example, off-gassing from furniture and carpets is a really big issue. So to avoid these particular hormone disruptors, you want to try to opt for hardwood floors and rugs instead of carpets. And you really want to air out your home before you buy any new or before you unpackage any new upholstered furniture. And the same goes for mattresses. Either find a natural one or let it air out in a really well ventilated space when you take the plastic off. One can also filter their air inside their home with a HEPA filter, or even bring green plants into your home. They can be really good detoxifiers. Snake plants, spider plants, or peace lilies are really great ones. And finally, if you suspect mold in your house, get it checked immediately. It's not a chemical, but it can be really toxic.
Quick personal story. I recently got an area rug, and following that, my cat started developing breathing issues and sneezing and uncharacteristic stuff. Took her to the vet, and lo and behold, the air had allergens in it, which then subsequently ended up causing asthma. So my cat is on a puffer on account of this. This carpet came wrapped in this thick plastic. It was dusty as all get out, having been shipped. And then I started doing a bunch of research on that. So it obviously affects us, but also affects the little creatures we've got in our home too. And I don't think that's offset by a plant. So out goes the carpet, stays the cat. So last but not least, what about the foods we eat and the drinks we drink?
Well, off the top, I appreciate this expense of what I'm about to recommend, but where possible, buy organic to reduce your pesticide and herbicide intake. And I would suggest going on the Environmental Working Group website to get their list of Dirty Dozen foods and Clean 15 foods. And this can give you a real guide as to which organic foods you truly should be buying. Next would be avoiding packaged goods as much as you can. Not only do many of them have chemical additives, as in the food itself, but they're also wrapped in plastic, and they can, to your point earlier, they can leach trace amounts of chemicals and microplastics. You always want to store your leftovers in glass containers, not plastic, and do not microwave anything in plastic. Next, I would also steer clear of colored drinks and foods. Colors usually mean chemicals. You want to buy your meats that are antibiotic and hormone free. And finally, really think about filtering your water.
Yeah, and I think on that dirty dozen list, you've got stuff like strawberries in there and some of the berries where morsels of dirt and chemicals can get stuck. And obviously using water with some vinegar and baking soda helps us, whether or not you're buying organic, to be able to clean those before we ingest them. But I've referred to that list a couple of times too. And by the way, when you do that, it doesn't affect the taste of the food. It just cleans it and also helps preserve it longer. And what strikes me in all of what you said today is it's a lot to remember, isn't it? It's just a lot. It's everywhere. It's everything we do because toxins are everywhere in our environment, what we consume, what we clean, how we just live. And so to go for close and try and summarize this, we have stuff to avoid, reduce, and actions to take to bolster our body's ability to clean out these toxins. To avoid or reduce in our environment, I think you called it out nicely, the fragrances, plastics, stuff like BPA and phthalates, flame retardants and coatings on things, insecticides, pesticides, cigarette smoke. In what we ingest, non-organic foods, packaged foods, colored drinks, minimize saturated fats and sugars, and reduce any use of a product with acetaminophen, and of course, avoid alcohol. And so that's on the what to avoid. And now what actions can we take on the liberating side is eat more cruciferous vegetables and veggies from the onion family. Load up our liver with good stuff. And a Mediterranean diet is at the core of much of this, and antioxidants that it needs to work effectively. And if you're a meat eater, eat antibiotic and hormone-free meats and sweat it out, right? Think exercise and saunas and get the toxins out of your body. Get it out also by eating fiber-rich foods. And go green. And by that, I mean get a plant. They clean much of our air for us. I do appreciate it can seem daunting to manage, but if you're unsure of what's good or bad, go on to the Environmental Working Group website to get a list, or just Google the top 10 chemicals to avoid in things like skincare. There's also a really great app called Yuka that scans food and cosmetic products and lets you know how good a product it is based on its toxic profile. So you can load that up on your phone and carry it with you. Jillian, again, thank you. Time to clean up, and I'm feeling cleaner already. Up next for ElleExcel, the tentative date is November the 1st. So jot that down in your calendars, but I will let you know that a formal invite will follow as we're lining up speakers. In this next session, we're going to do what's called as a bit of a skills tune-up. So many of you talked about the importance of communication. We're going to bring that back onto the docket and reinforce how to communicate with impact on a screen, in a room, with family, with friends, in a work setting, you name it. We're going to tackle some communications and influencing skills around asking for what you want, be it a raise, be it a promotion, be it just a bit of space, either way. And we are going to chip away at self-confidence and talk about how to build that up in ourselves, as well as the community of others that are around us and how that actually helps define our own self-worth. So please mark your calendars. The invite will come, and the invites will be out to you in October. And so I really do appreciate and thank you so much for the really active chat thread today, for attending and continually shaping ElleExcel so that it helps women excel in all aspects of our lives. And for the men on the line too, we appreciate you and thank you so much for coming out, for weighing in, for helping us be a stronger community. What a way to wind into the weekend with this inner fuel and sense of that we are better and understood and better supported. We know how to advocate a little bit better now, and what we need to do that and to help those around us. You'll now see on screen a couple of poll questions. Really appreciate if we could get your feedback on today's session so I can continue to retool them ongoing. You'll see also some post-mail pearls of wisdom. These are not new to us, but they will follow the sessions to make sure we cement the learning and also allow you to flip it to others. And if you want to relive the magic, you can log on to the ElleExcel website at www.ellexcel.ca and grab the wellness videos, any of the panel videos, as well as Women by the Numbers, and share them with others. I feel so blessed to be surrounded by a strong community of women and advocates and men, and all of you having the courage to show up, to help each other, to offer your advice to others. and make sure that we collectively, as a community, continue to thrive. And with that, we now have a wrap.
ElleExcel, bringing women to the circle. We give and we get like a beautiful cycle. Ladies of all levels with the sorts of titles. Generation X, Y, Z, and more. Connect one another and we open our doors. Spread your wings, dream big, let's soar. Raise one another with mentorship. Level up all the ladies with advice and tips. Listen, you're all you can conceive. Everything that you believe, forever beautiful. And as strong as the day is long, full of will. And no matter the hill, you're balanced by grace. Just brace, cause you're limitless in life. All you need is in you. Anything you wanna do, know you're standing at the edge of a rainbow. 90s and you 100. Give yourself more cred. Perfection's an illusion of necessity. In that narrow gap, it's freedom, you see. Freedom to say that's enough. And I know that it's tough, and it takes a bit of wisdom to recognize your boundaries. Bubble bath, take a breath, or relax by the breeze. Just remember you are worth the 10 points. Want to excel in all aspects of life? Do you want to be inspired? Gain learnings for life. ElleExcel, spread the word, do tell. ElleExcel, spread the word, do tell.